Hey everyone, and welcome to the Sunny Go One Piece podcast. On this episode, we're going to be getting into episodes 632 through 634, which will cover manga chapters 703 through 705. And with Ace's fruit now on the line, Luffy will need to figure out a way to get that back from Doflamingo through the Corrida Colosseum Tournament. So, synopsis. With the Mera fruit as the grand prize for the Corrida Colosseum Tournament, Luffy has made it his goal to win back his brother Ace's old fruit to make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Within the Colosseum, Luffy meets a colorful cast of combatants that Luffy will need to defeat to earn back the fruit. Alright, so there are a lot of differences, and this is one of the reasons why Dressrosa is so long and so poorly paced, because they, at every opportunity, they will throw in random scenes or extend scenes out longer than it needs to be, and it happens at a much more frequent pacing. So yeah, these episodes have a lot. So let's get into it. So the first one, in the last third of episode 632, there's an extended sequence that's filler with Sanji going with Violet to that rundown kitchen where he makes her food and stuff like that. Then Zoro kind of continuing on to run after Shusui while Kinemon is getting that air kiss from the vendor lady. That's all added in the anime. In the manga, as soon as Sanji agrees to help Violet, it then cuts to the moment where Frankie and Luffy make it to the Colosseum and see the commotion with the toy soldier and everything. So none of that ever happens, and it's skipped over completely. Another scene that's added is there's a scene of Frankie asking the toy soldier about the Don Quixote family and the factory. This was also added in the anime. The following scene with Sanji and Violet running from more soldiers after he cooks for her is also added. In the manga, both of these scenes are absent, and it goes straight to Luffy entering the Colosseum prep room or the armory. In the anime, when Spartan tries to attack Luffy, they add several more punches that Luffy dodges, but in the manga, he just dodges the one punch and then just absolutely destroys him. And in the manga, it seems more devastating too, as he's sunk further into the stone floor, and he's got like blood gushing out of his head, and it's all over his face. Obviously, this part was probably edited more so for the younger audience and just censored down a little bit. Another change is when Sai gets inexplicably angry that Luffy thanks them. In the manga, as he's being dragged away by his brother Boo, he's flipping the bird to Luffy, which is of course censored in the anime, but it's a pretty funny panel in the manga. In the anime, we also see the beginning of the A block fight and a formal explanation of the Battle Royale rules, whereas in the manga, we only get to see the conclusion of this A block, where it's revealed that Jesus Burgess is a participant and has already won the A block. And so all that added stuff before he rips off the paper bag, that's pretty much all filler in the A block. That's the only thing we actually get to see in the A block fight in the anime, is just literally him winning the round and tearing off the paper bag. Additionally, there's more added to the conclusion of the A block battle royale, as well as before Jesus reveals himself. So yeah, this entire thing they just added. I mean, I can honestly say that this isn't terrible. It does definitely drag out the pacing, but it makes sense to add some of this stuff back in if they really wanted to. Another change is the scene where Luffy is excited in the armory is far longer, as well as the scene where Cavendish entering the armory and making the female attendant swoon is also added in the anime. In the manga, he only makes like 2 attendants swoon as he enters the doorway, and it's like this one tiny panel where he kind of like starts to talk to Luffy as he's trying out different armors and weapons. There's an extra scene of Fujitora bringing down a girl's lost balloon back down to her and using his gravity powers, kind of referencing back to Logtown, where Smoker also was kind to that little girl who tripped and spilled her ice cream on his pants. However, I do like this added touch. It is added filler, but it also is kind of redundant, because in the original, that scene with Smoker, that scene was basically the scene that reveals to us that Smoker is actually a Marine, officer that had a good intentions. Whereas this, yes, this serves the same purpose for Fujitora. But the thing is like there's also a canon scene that follows directly after this. So it's like you have two scenes that show Fujitora is a good person. So it seems like this scene with the balloon is unnecessary because in the very next scene, we see Fujitora telling his subordinates, like, we shouldn't be counting the number of enemies. We should actually be counting the number of civilians that we need to protect. I mean, that alone is a great way to show that Fujitora cares about people more so than apprehending pirates and criminals. So, both of those don't necessarily need to be there, and so that's why it's kind of filler. Okay, so with those differences kind of out of the way, let's get into my thoughts on the episodes themselves. So picking up from where the last episode left off, we learned the format of the tournament is a battle royale split into different blocks where they will not only fight each other, but eventually need to go up against the members of the Don Quixote family. And we're introduced to several members that we haven't seen yet, as well as some we have seen. Beginning with the hardest of hard-boiled men, Senor Pink, and you'll eventually get that reference. Then we get Dellinger, Lao Ji, Mach Weiss, and finally the man we saw earlier in the diamond seat, Diamante, which also happens to mean diamond in Italian, Spanish, and Portuguese. And obviously Diamante's design is clearly inspired by Steven Tyler, the lead singer of the band Aerosmith, which Oda has admitted that is in fact the case. Many people when it comes to Lao Ji wonder what his name means and what the G stands for. And this is actually kind of a wordplay in two different languages, as Lao is Chinese for old, and the G, if you consider how in Japanese when you add G to things, it means old or grandpa in Japanese. So for example, an old man is Oji-san. So his name is effectively old man. So that's kind of the joke with Lao Ji's name. And Luffy, of course, wants to go after the Mera Mera fruit and even offers it to Frankie, which surprisingly he denies because he doesn't want to become unable to swim, which as a shipwright makes a lot of sense when you really think about it. They eventually make their way to the Colosseum where they see some commotion that is brewing with one of the toy people. This one-legged toy soldier is being chased by the police, but uses the laws that anyone in the Colosseum is safe, even if they're criminals. And I do like that it's basically like this sort of lawless area where people have kind of safe haven. Kind of like, I guess, Tortuga in Pirates of the Caribbean. Now, as far as the toy soldier goes, currently this is just our first taste of this character, so I won't go too much into them since we don't learn much about him right here until we actually get a proper introduction. But I want to take some time to talk about the voice actor because this is one that I, and as well as many other anime fans, may be somewhat familiar with. And this is Rikiya Koyama, who most people will recognize as the voice of Yamato from Naruto, the ninja that would take over for Kakashi as the lead of the Team 7 temporarily at the beginning of Shippuden to help Naruto keep his QB outbursts kind of under control. Also from Hunter x Hunter, he plays Gon's mysterious father, Gene Freaks, in the 2011 reboot. However, for me, he is most well known for being the second and current voice actor for Kogoro Mori from Detective Conan, who took over the role from Akira Kamiya, who due to contractual disputes left the role in 2009. And while I will always prefer Kamiya as Kogoro, Koyama is an excellent voice actor and does his best to portray Kogoro with the same style but with his own flair and staying true to what came before him. And he brings that talent over to the toy soldier, which he does a great job as the toy soldier as well. So yeah, great to have him on board. And he won't be the only Detective Conan alum in One Piece introduced here in Dressrosa, as we will talk about another even more prominent one later on. Now, Luffy, seeing the last call for entries into the tournament, announces to everyone that he's going to enter, and everyone is shocked because apparently no one from the general public ever enters due to how dangerous it is, as well as the fact that everyone thinks he's an old man, like a literal old man with his white beard. And it's at this moment, and I can't believe I never put this together up until this rewatch, But Luffy's disguise here is probably a reference and homage to Master Roshi from Dragon Ball, which Oda is, of course, a fan of and considers Toriyama a mentor and friend. And like, he looks exactly like him with the colorful, like, Hawaiian style shirt, the sunglasses, and the similar style beard and goatee. And the next scene is also one of my favorites, when Frankie warns Luffy that he can go all out, but just make sure he doesn't reveal his identity. And the first thing he does is when he attempts to sign up is use his real name and even starts saying Lu. And Frankie immediately knocks him over the head. He ultimately lands on Lucy because he already wrote Lu. And I also just realized his fake name is also a Roshi reference, as when you pronounce Roshi and Lucy in Japanese, they're very similar. So when you say Lucy in Japanese, it said Lushi, and instead of the S sound, you get the SH sound instead. So it sounds like Lushi, and which sounds very similar to Roshi. And I can't believe I just got this connection after all these years. Like, as I was literally writing this part of the script in my head, I just thought to myself, this is definitely a reference. And I don't know how I missed this for like several years, because this isn't exactly the first time I've rewatched Dressrosa or reread it. And yeah, I am literally putting this together right now. Another cool reference is his contestant number, 0556. Is also a reference to Luffy's favorite number and his birthday, as in May, which is 05, is his birth month, and then 56 is, when you read it a certain way in Japanese, can be read go for 5 and mu for 6. So when you put 5 and 6 together, it's gomu, or rubber. So, obviously it's a reference to Gomu Gomu no Mi. And yeah, I do like the fact that that's also a reference. This also marks another well-known shonen battle anime story trope that gets introduced here with the tournament that One Piece has finally indulged in, and that's the famous tournament arc. Many of the famous shonen battle anime series have them. Some of the more prominent ones are like Yu Yu Hakusho with the Dark Tournament saga. Dragon Ball has had many of them, especially during the early Dragon Ball part of the series, with all the Tenkaichi Budokai tournaments, both the 22nd and the 23rd, and later on with the Cell games in Dragon Ball Z, and then the Tournament of Power in Dragon Ball Super. Naruto obviously had its famous Chunin exam tournament. My Hero Academia recently had its UA Sports Festival tournament. Hunter x Hunter has the Heaven's Arena tournament, just to name a few off the top of my head. I'm sure there are many more tournament arcs that I'm missing, but I'm not going to go look up every single anime tournament. I'm just going to list off the ones that I personally remember. Needless to say, this is a staple of shonen anime, and it's kind of amazing that Oda managed to make it this far before having to use it. Once inside, of course, people underestimate Luffy for his size, and one dude named Spartan tries to take Luffy out, but he makes quick work of him, and it's here we see several silhouettes of the real fighters to keep an eye out for. Luffy almost gets disqualified, but is saved by three other fighters, Sai, Boo, and Chinjao of the Chinjao family. At this point, a crap ton of new characters are introduced, like the Assassin Brothers, Kelly and Bobby Funk, who interestingly have their names like they are pronounced in the West, with their given name first and then their family name second, because as you know, a lot of people in One Piece and in Japan or any Eastern country, their last name comes first, then their given name. But these guys, it's reversed. It's actually like how we actually say it here in the West. Then the fighting king, King Elizabelo II, with his tactician Dagama, are also introduced from the Prudence Kingdom. One thing that is technically a difference is that Elizabelo has his boxing gloves on in the anime, but in the manga, he doesn't have them on yet until the actual fighting begins. And so, yeah, I didn't mention this in the differences section, but it is a small difference. Dagama goes on to list several other combatants who are basically outlaws, like bounty hunters, criminals, terrorists, and even pirates, like Slayman, Orlumbus, Abdullah, and Jeet. But the three most notable ones are saved for last, as Bellamy makes his return to the story as one of the contestants. This was a surprise, but I guess I should also have expected to see him, since we knew that he worked for Doflamingo, but the last time we saw him, he was about to be cut down by Circus, who was being controlled by Doflamingo all the way back at Jaya during the Skypiea arc, but it would, it would make sense that he's alive still because we never actually saw him get killed. We only heard it off screen. This was definitely something I was looking forward to, seeing how Bellamy would react to Luffy now that Luffy is this infamous pirate, and whether they would have a rematch during this tournament. And yeah, this is obviously how this set of episodes ends, as we will talk about later. The last two, are going to be significant as they're kept in your typical Oda silhouettes and probably the strongest contestants with Cavendish and Bartolomeo. And oh god, I can't wait to get into these two when they show up properly. Also, once this exposition is over, we hear that Dagama has a unique One Piece laugh as Gamma hehehe, which is basically the last part of his name, but he's given one of Oda's trademark unique laughs. Once in the armory, Luffy gets crazy excited at the array of armor and weapons and immediately throws on way too much, just like how he got excited at the armor back in Thriller Bark and he throws that knight armor on because it looks cool. And it's here we are properly introduced to Cavendish, the first of the two big ones, as kind of this Adonis who makes women swoon and men even marvel at his beauty. He makes it a point to make it known that he got to where he is without even trying, which is, I guess, an interesting flex. And yeah, he has no devil fruit and he's never worked hard to get it. He's just naturally gifted, apparently. Although, pay attention to this fact because there kind of is a reason for this that we will learn later on. Now, Cavendish's epithet is Hakuba, or white horse, and he's kind of your anime stereotypical trope of the beautiful narcissist type of character you see in many different series. They're all usually very good looking, self-absorbed and kind of narcissistic, and often come from rich backgrounds and have this sort of like noble and proper way of speaking. And speaking of speaking, Cavendish is voiced by Akira Ishida, who to anime fans is a voice that is very familiar to them, as he plays probably two of the more prolific villains in two very popular series, both new and old. So Ishida is the voice of Gaara from Naruto, and also Akaza, the upper rank 3 demon in Demon Slayer. And of course, Gaara is a complicated character, but I won't spoil that just in case you haven't seen Naruto. Needless to say, Akira Ishida can do a very sinister sounding voice, but here he plays a much different character than Gaara or Akaza, as he plays the more comedic pretty boy. And needless to say, they got a great voice actor playing Cavendish because he does an amazing job. Cavendish goes on to ask Luffy who he was after being intrigued with how he took down Spartan so easily. And Luffy instinctively answers with his usual introduction that he's Luffy, the man who will become the Pirate King. And everyone instantly freaks out hearing this, that it's Luffy. But he takes off all the armor to reveal that his name is actually Lucy. And the room just instantly turns from fear to annoyance, with one guy even yelling back, "Quit it with the confusing pronunciation." And like I've mentioned in the past, it's honestly really cool to see that Luffy is no longer this no-name rookie that everyone underestimates. His name now strikes terror in many people, just like how his old opponents would be presented to us as he was going through the earlier part of the Grand Line. And I love the bit where one of them even mentions that he heard that Luffy was this like 8 meter tall big ass dude. And although I can kind of see how a rumor like this could start, considering many people who have kind of witnessed Luffy use Gear 3rd probably saw him as this like massive guy and saw that, and then the account of that could have been morphed into Luffy being a massive man as it's being retold over and over and over through kind of the grapevines. Now, as we learn more about Cavendish, his motivation for being a pirate and entering the tournament is absurd in a funny way. He treats being a pirate like a pop star. He loves the attention and adoration he gets from his fans, particularly the ladies. But because of Luffy and the worst generation that came up a year after he set out, it's taken his limelight away from him, which in a world where people, as we just saw, are absolutely terrified of pirates at this level, it's a pretty funny juxtaposition to see someone who treats being a pirate in such a casual way. Of course, Luffy can't sit still long enough to hear anyone's long-winded backstory, like always, And he just kind of goes about his business and steps on the scale after he's taken off all the armor just to make sure that he meets the minimum qualifications. After this interaction with Cavendish, next we meet another one of the major contestants, the scantily clad Rebecca. Now, Rebecca is one of those infamous characters for her design. As you can tell, it's really over the top. Way over the top. It's been a source of a lot of debates and memes. Very regularly, you'll have people arguing over the appropriateness of her design and whether it goes too far or if it fits with the story. I mean, with how all the male gladiators are also pretty much half naked, it kind of makes sense. But I think the issue for me that makes me a little uncomfortable is the fact that she's only 16 at this point in the story. That's literally a child. And she's drawn like an adult with like this bikini model looking thing. The kind of the over sexualization of a literal child does make me a little uncomfortable, especially when as I've grown older. But I do think that the discussion is a little bit overblown with her, as ultimately there is a decent story reason why she's dressed like this. And I think Rebecca's main issue is not so much her design, but more so her character writing had some pretty big missed opportunities, which I will get into, as the arc continues and point that out. And I think that's my biggest issue with Rebecca. Sure, her design is really over the top and kind of inappropriate, but at the same time, I think with Rebecca, my bigger problem with her is just her character writing is a really missed opportunity, because Rebecca is actually a good character when you kind of boil it down, but the story just doesn't convey it very well. Rebecca and Luffy do bond immediately over their admiration of the statue of the legendary mystery gladiator Kyros. The man is said to have won 3,000 matches and never lost in the Colosseum. However, no one seems to have any memory of this person having existed. When I first read this in the manga, I thought maybe this was some kind of a trick or propaganda that Doflamingo fabricated to keep the fighters motivated. Sort of like if you fight this hard and you win enough, and you too can be a legend like Kyros and be immortalized with a statue. However, I also had my doubts as well because of kind of the tone of this scene. Clearly Rebecca is a good person and probably will most certainly serve as sort of the emotional side character, similar to how Vivi was back in the Arabasta arc, if we're using sort of the Arabasta mirroring angle. And Luffy also seems to get along with her. And the fact that she seems to be kind of bullied by all the male combatants for being this tiny girl in this tournament, there's this warmth about this scene. And especially in the anime, the sentiment is even more emphasized with the music and the voice acting. So there is kind of this mystery or air of mystery as to who Kyros is and what he represents, because it is an interesting mystery as to like what he actually is and whether he'll actually show up. The other interesting about Rebecca is it seems like she's been fighting in these tournaments for a while now, but this time she wants to win and get the Meta fruit for herself so that she can finally have the power to take down Doflamingo. So we now know she is definitely going to be an ally. And it's here with that line. My initial theory was that Luffy was going to develop a friendship with Rebecca throughout the tourney and eventually maybe even give her the fruit or even somehow allow her to win the fruit herself. I felt like I finally might have a potential answer to where the fruit might end up going. But I also thought to myself, Luffy is going to be the one to defeat Doflamingo. And you also still have Law, too, who has wanted to beat Doflamingo. So I didn't think that it was possible that Rebecca was going to use the fruit to defeat Doflamingo. So then why? I guess I kind of had this thought of why give it to her from a story perspective. So I was still a little confused as to potentially where the Meta fruit could potentially go. And like so many theories ran through my head at this time because of how many mysteries were introduced right here at this point in the story. And we're only like 6 episodes into Dressrosa, I think. Of course, like I said, we will certainly explore Rebecca more as her story progresses, as there is a lot with this character. But I do want to talk about her voice actor, as I mentioned earlier, as she is another very famous voice actor and probably the most prolific one of the 3 that I've mentioned in this podcast so far. Rebecca is played by the legendary voice actor Megumi Hayashibara. You will probably know her as the voice of characters like Rei Ayanami from Evangelion, Faye Valentine from Cowboy Bebop, Ranma from Ranma One Half, Anna from Shaman King. In both versions, for Ranma and Shaman King, both versions of the original series and the more recently reboots. And many people probably won't know this one, but she also plays Musashi, aka Jessie, from Team Rocket from the Japanese version of the Pokemon anime for its entire 20 plus year run, which is nuts. Not only that, but she's also a very accomplished singer and has sung the opening themes to many animes like Shaman King and even Love Hina, where she also voices the hotel manager Haruka in that series as well. However, my favorite role of hers, again, is from Detective Conan as the enigmatic and complex Ai Haibara, easily the best written character on that series and a fan favorite, including myself. So it's awesome to see that someone of that pedigree is now in One Piece too, in a pretty pivotal character to this arc and potentially for the rest of the series as well. I love the fact that Megumi Hayashibara is now in One Piece. Moving on with the story, it's at this point the A block battle royale concludes where a man named Mr. Store is beating up on everyone to win the block, but it's pretty freaking obvious to us, and it should be obvious to everyone, that it's Jesus Burgess from the Blackbeard pirate crew. And this revelation is of course notable because now there's a fighter who has a real chance at winning the Meta Meta fruit besides Doflamingo and Luffy. And we, as the audience, know that this absolutely cannot happen, creating another layer of suspense for this tournament. And I find it hilarious that everyone freaks out after he rips his paper bag off and finds out that he's, Burgess, as if you can't tell just by looking at him. Like, it's so obvious. And however, it's not just the outlaws who are interested in the tournament and the Meta Meta fruit, as it's revealed that the Marines have one of their own entered into the tournament, as we are introduced to a new Vice Admiral, Maynard. And it's perfectly understandable why they would be interested, as they'd want to keep one of the more powerful devil fruits falling back into the hands of a pirate. And this then leads into Fujitora's official introduction as the new admiral, as he gets his Marine Admiral coat, which I don't understand how that big ass coat fit into that tiny saddlebag of that subordinates. And it's also here we learn his real name, as like the rest of the admirals. Fujitora is just the code name, and his real name is Issho. And this next scene is what really cements him as sort of the spiritual successor to Aokiji as the good-natured admiral, is the fact that he has his men make sure to account for how many civilians are in the Colosseum, as well as the total population of the city. And when questioned by his subordinate that shouldn't their priority be to count the number of threats on the island, Fujitora just flat out says that they should be aware of the number of people they actually need to protect, not the other way around, which is the perfect way to show that Issho is a man that prioritizes protecting people more than taking down the enemies. And he's essentially the antithesis to Akainu or Sakazuki. He will do anything to protect innocents, even at the risk of failing to capture the outlaws, which is the complete opposite of Akainu. He is completely willing to sacrifice innocent people to capture outlaws, which, as you know already, I absolutely love Marines like him. And Issho is yet another Marine character that I freaking love. And you will probably fall in love with him even more as Dressrosa continues, because Issho is honestly one of the coolest and probably one of the more upstanding Marine characters pretty much in the series. And I love Issho, to be honest. Like, he's definitely one of my favorite Marine characters. Now, one scene that I haven't talked about is earlier on, we eventually do catch back up with Zoro and Sanji chasing after the Shusui. And it's interesting how the anime decided to add a little moment where it's implied that Zoro is using observation haki to keep tabs on whoever stole Shusui. And this is how he kind of figures out where the sword is going. Then we're introduced to Violet, the flamenco dancer, and there is another moment that's added in the anime that made me chuckle, where Sanji notices her and Zoro asks, "Did you see the fairy?" And Sanji responds, "It's a goddess." And the way Nakai Kazuya says, "Huh?" is so damn funny. I love it when he does that. Zoro also reminds Sanji that this place is known for their women stabbing their men out of passion, and Sanji excitedly saying that "I want to be stabbed" is also pretty funny. Then it just devolves back into the trademark nosebleed joke as Violet seems to be on the run from the authorities and uses Sanji to hide, causing him to spew blood out from his nose, which I was kind of scared that this might turn into another Fishman Island scenario. However, their over-the-top dramatic conversation is a lot more funnier in this scene, but I was praying to God that this whole nosebleed joke doesn't come back around in Dressrosa, because that would be way too much. I already couldn't stand it in Fishman Island. I did not want to see another arc where the story revolved around this, or this played a heavy role in the story. The episode ends on the tease of Bellamy approaching Luffy as he clearly recognizes him. And this will be an interesting interaction that we've all been kind of excited to see ever since it was revealed that he was here, which unfortunately we'll have to wait until the next podcast episode, because that's where the cliffhanger ends for episode 634. But yeah, if you did enjoy this, send me a like or comment, and if you want to join me on this journey of rewatching One Piece, please consider subscribing. Check out my Instagram at SunnyGo Podcast for updates when I post new episodes, and to see pictures of my manga collection and card collection. But yeah, as always, I wanted to thank you for taking the time out to listen to my podcast. No spoiler section today, so stay safe out there, and I hope to see you on the next episode. Bye!